It has been said that 4 generations after a person dies, most human beings, except a few people, but most human beings, 4 generations after they die, they are totally forgotten. That means there's nobody alive who remembers them. 4 generations after a person dies. That's very humbling. That means there will come a generation that would not even know you existed. Even your descendants may not know. And to prove that fact, how many of you remember your great-great-great-grandfather? Did you have a great-great-great-grandfather? Yes. Did you have a great-great-great-grandmother? Yes. Did they give birth to your great-grandparents? Yes. And did they give birth after that to your grandparents? Yes. And to your parents and to you? Yes. You are part of their bloodline, but they are totally out of your thinking. You don't think of them. You don't remember anything about them. You don't remember they even existed. So, how do we ensure that something that happened 2,000 years ago doesn't go through that process? Jesus said, in order not to forget what I have done, you have to always celebrate my death. And so anytime we partake of communion, we are looking backwards. And it becomes more and more urgent because we are about 2,000 years removed from the death of Jesus Christ. The early apostles, they were there, they saw it. Their descendants probably didn't see it, but they were reminded of it. But there were people then who were alive maybe 50 years after Jesus died, 100 years after Jesus died. Somebody will say, oh, my grandfather told me about Jesus, and then my great-grandfather told me about Jesus. But down the line, about 200 years down, there will be nobody who has a living memory that a man existed called Jesus, and that he died on the cross of Calvary, and that in his death we have life. Nobody would remember that. So how do we remember? The communion. The communion. Without that, everything Jesus did is forgotten. So, when we partake of communion, we are continuing a chain of remembrance. A chain of remembrance that must never be broken. Because when we break that chain of remembrance, we forget about what happened 2,000 years ago and all the benefit that it brought to us. So we look back to the Lord's death. What do we look back to? We look back to 2 things. To his suffering. Why do we look back to his suffering? The communion, we remember that the body of Jesus was broken. That's why the bread is broken. So anytime I celebrate the communion and I take the bread, I break it before all of us to see that this body of Jesus was broken. What does the breaking mean? It means he suffered. His body was injured. His body was damaged. His body was broken. And that is important. Secondly, we look back to his suffering. When we take the bread, we remember Jesus suffered. The broken body, the body that was abused, mutilated, suffered. But with everything Jesus did, he didn't do it for himself. His body was not broken for himself. If your body gets broken, it's for you. If something happens and you are whipped, nobody benefits. You just probably are suffering for something you did wrong or just a personal injury. But when Jesus died and his body was broken, it had an effect not on him, but on us. So his body was broken so that our broken bodies can be mended. In his wounds, we are healed. And God does not want us ever to forget that. So that when you are sick, you don't say, well, these days, I have all these sicknesses, my waist here, my waist there, my knees, and my whatever. That's your broken body. But you must always remember when you come to the table that his body was broken so that mine will not be broken. So that in his brokenness, I will have wholeness. So we look back, and it's very easy to forget. All of us forget. You go through your pain, and you are just managing your pain with all kinds of things, and you go through suffering. You just try your best. You're taking paracetamol here and then trying to just make it do, and then you forget that there is a provision made for you, and that in his brokenness you can be mended. By his stripes we don't suffer. We don't get whipped. By his stripes, we are healed. He was not broken for us to be broken. He was broken for us to be mended. And whatever is broken in your life this morning, Christ comes to put it back together.